Well, we are at our one-year anniversary of the Ag+Bio+Science podcast, and are so excited to have with us for this edition of the podcast, Beth Bechdol. Beth is the president and CEO of AgriNovus Indiana, and she joins us to mark this occasion, give us an update on some very exciting things going on at AgriNovus. As always, Beth, welcome.
Great. It's nice to be back.
First of all, let's talk about the podcast. I have an Inside Indiana business. We have enjoyed so much doing this. In large part because it is amazing to see the diverse talent and the voices in the ag-bioscience sector in Indiana. It really is amazing.
It is. And I will tell you, I can't acknowledge that I have any favorites because that would create problems for me politically with partners. But one of the things that I think I recognize, and I would also encourage people binge listen to the podcast. Yep. And I know that I get into my habit of every Monday morning listening to them, but on my 2-hour drives down to Indianapolis from home in Auburn, I will go through multiple of them. And that's when you get, I think, the real feeling of diversity and breadth of talent. And one of the things that I love the most about each one of these podcasts, Gerry, that you do so well is you pull out so many of the pieces that really demonstrate to people what we're trying to show them are the ag-biosciences, right? So one week you'll have a story about microbiology, and the next it's a story about a fat replacement for consumer types of products. And then the next week it's swarm robotics. Who knows what swarm robotics are, right? And so to be able to put all of those voices together, those are the voices that for us really validate and showcase what the ag-bioscience sector in Indiana even is. Yeah,
we'll talk about in a moment jobs and talent and all of the things going on in that regard in the ag-biosciences. But first, look back, if you will. It's been 5 years since the launch of what became AgriNovus Indiana. And I remember distinctly at the launch, one of the things that impressed me the most about it was the feeling that there was so much support in the room from the corporate community, from the academic community, right from the get-go. That always doesn't happen.
That's correct. And we've been able to continue to grow our stakeholder base, our partner base, our investors. But you hit it squarely on point. I think one of the things that really distinguishes AgriNovus and the success that we've been able to build thus far is that you had all of those buckets of people, you might say, categories of people and organizations all building the organization and its longer-term strategy together. So you had philanthropy, you had Indiana commodity farm producer organizations, you had the corporate industry R&D innovators, you had colleges and universities, you had the state of Indiana. Having all of them at the table from the very beginning really sets you on a pretty valuable course to be able to hit all of the next sets of priorities and to make sure that you continue to keep all of those entities kind of eye on the longer term target and this strategy that we have of really putting Indiana on that global map for ag bioscience innovation.
How would you characterize, because we cover it on a daily basis and we see it, but to the masses out there, how would you characterize the momentum that's going on in the sector with all of those sectors you talk about coming together and success kind of breeding success?
Yeah, so I think probably for me at least in the last year, I see it mostly, and I don't want to make me picking one tactical area of our work seem more important than another, but when I really kind of step back and look at the momentum and what's changed, have we really sort of moved the needle? I would say it's in the space of economic development, and it's the shots on goal and then the goals, not just the opportunity to attract a new company, to get somebody to relocate to Indiana, to get them to grow here. We're getting more looks, and I think that is a couple of things. I think that's us finally telling the story of what we have here and doing it pretty authoritatively and pretty loudly and in some pretty intentional markets. I also think it is an enhanced relationship that has grown over the last couple of years between AgriNovus, the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, the governor's office, the State Department of Agriculture. We're kind of running on all cylinders now as it relates to this strategy of really trying to bring global companies really top line R&D cutting edge companies from the coast, whether it's from San Francisco, whether it's from Boston to Indiana. And the list that we have achieved in getting them here over the last 18 months is really pretty impressive.
Well, I know connectivity is a big focus of the organization, kind of bridging East and West Coast, if you will, and bringing those folks together. And again, the perception of Indiana from an innovation standpoint in the sector, continues to increase exponentially.
Right. I think Governor Holcomb really, whether he intended to do it or not, crystallized this point in my mind at last year's Forbes Ag Tech Summit. He was on stage being interviewed by Steve Forbes, and Mr. Forbes posed the question about kind of being the, flyover region, not a lot of activity, but hey, Governor, you're really trying to be much more business focused, bring common sense, have a really strong, sort of political structure to support your business community. And he kind of preface that with a little bit of a look at all this ag tech stuff that's happening in Silicon Valley and all this tech, development that's there. And the governor sort of responded with this comment of, but, we're not trying to compete with Silicon Valley. We want to complement it. We want to cooperate with it. And I'm not kidding, Gerry, like sitting in the audience, all of a sudden there was this aha light bulb moment for me, thinking about the work of AgriNovus in, okay, let's go do that. Let's go figure out in this space of ag tech, the Agbiosciences, how do we create a corridor of sorts or a bridge in some way that brings West Coast pure tech data, not a lot of ag background, to the Midwest, where we have complementary technology assets and skills, but we have the row crop production, we have the animal agriculture, we have the farming community, we have the agribusiness community that can all start to link that together. And so we've had some pretty exciting developments in the last year, some partnerships with some California-based venture organizations. The Forbes relationship is growing. We continue to be a part of both their Salinas, California event, and then we'll be back in Indianapolis in September this year.
And I think the Forbes, that summit is a great example. Having it in Indiana, that was the first time, I think, outside of California.
Correct.
That they held
and they've been running it in Salinas for about 5 years, and Forbes had sort of realized that while that event itself was growing at great pace, it still was very focused on a Western style of agriculture. And if you're going to be examining the future of technology and innovation in this larger food and agricultural community, you need to have some kind of footprint in the Midwest. And so we're excited that it's coming back to Indianapolis.
And AgriNovus is growing too. You announced a new staffing addition to support the expanding talent-focused programming. Talk a little bit about that and how important this focus on talent is.
That's one that I would tell you is a foundational pillar for us. If we really are going to, as I said earlier, put Indiana on that national and global map for ag-bioscience innovation, it's great to have global innovators like a Corteva Agri-Science and an Elanco and a Beck's Hybrids and world-class research institutions like Purdue and the other colleges and universities that are here. But we've got to have 21st century talent. And the talent in food and agriculture is changing. As I talk to more young people, the Gen Z audience, I have to keep telling them that if you think about a career in food and agriculture, please don't just think about farmers, agronomists, soil scientists, or veterinarians. I need you to think about robotics engineers, about chemists, about geneticists, about data analysts, about web developers, about drone operators, about imagery analysts. And so that will be for AgriNovus going forward this year and into next. Probably one of our most pivotal programming areas is really helping students at colleges and universities in Indiana who don't have agricultural programs, who aren't the Purdues, aren't the Huntingtons, aren't the Ivy Techs, aren't the Vincents, but they have incredibly well-suited other colleges, other disciplines that food and agricultural employers need. We need to get their students thinking about career exploration in the ag biosciences.
How about anything else we can look for in the second half of 2019? Can you give us a preview?
It'll be busy.
Yeah, that's good.
So I would say the second half of this year for us will include some really big and signature events. Many of them will look very similar to what we were involved in last year. We will be back with the National FFA, with Microsoft and other partners at the Blue Room. The Forbes team is coming back to Indianapolis in September, the 18th and 19th. And then our own AgriNovus Innovation Summit, we hold annually in November. That date is November 20th. Get it on your calendars now. But that will be an outstanding one-day event. And so there will be a lot of opportunities for people to get kind of plugged in and be a part of a lot of the work that we're doing to promote the sector.
A lot of exciting stuff that we'll be covering, I know, on a weekly basis. Okay, lastly, let's talk about the next few weeks of the podcast. We're going to really be doing a mini series of sorts featuring the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership, which AgriNovus is an initiative of. Can you do some setup, if you will, for our listeners on why this is a part of the Indiana is Ag+Bio+Science podcast and what they'll be hearing in the next few weeks?
Sure. So we realize that while we get exposure to all of these other amazing industry initiatives here in the state, our listeners who are focused around AgriNovus and the Ag+Bio+Sciences probably don't have that natural appreciation for the overlap in subject material and convergence of technologies that we see. So our listeners are going to get to hear from the leaders of BioCrossroads, from Connexus, from TechPoint, from Energy Systems Network and Ascend. And what we find more and more is whether it's around disruptive technologies or advanced industries, there's an overlap, right? There's this word convergence that takes place. If you're talking about artificial intelligence, that's not unique to just one industry cluster. That's tech-oriented, that's energy-oriented, that's advanced manufacturing-oriented, and that affects the Ag+Bio+Sciences. And so here inside the parent organization of CICP, we get the luxury of every day seeing how Indiana is so uniquely positioned to bring all of these pieces of this technology puzzle and even the talent puzzle with Ascend being here together, that we wanted to make sure that our listeners had this kind of firsthand opportunity, marketing our 20th year anniversary of Central Indiana Corporate Partnership being here in the state, to make sure that everybody understood how we all fit together and really how all of us are collectively trying to do more to advance the state of Indiana.
Beth Bechdol is the CEO of AgriNovus Indiana. Beth, thanks for taking the time to be here. Thank you for your leadership as well. Amazing to see not only where AgriNovus has been the last 5 years, but where it's headed. A lot of exciting things.
Thanks for making the Ag+Bio+Science story come to life.
You've reached the end of another episode of Ag+Bio+Science's CICP mini-series with your host, Gerry Dick of Inside Indiana Business. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or Google Play. Connect with AgriNovus at agrinovusindiana.com and with Inside Indiana Business at insideindianabusiness.com. Don't forget to join us next Monday for another episode. Thank you for listening.